Time to put on our thinking caps.
Let's do it.
We're joined by Dante Jones and Jim Jackson.
Boycott.
3 months.
You all know
You said 3 months.
I'm a journalist, and we've got our resident Ivy Leaguer over here, Marcellus. We're going to take a deeper look at a big issue in the sports world. We've got our special cap for Marcellus, our Columbia grad.
That Darnell.
Darnell, bring it on out. Darnell, you can hang out over there. We may get to you here on this topic, but we'll
Selling these caps out front. That's what Darnell did.
All right, let's revisit a topic we got into yesterday during discussion about the role of athletes in politics. I argued that the money today's athletes earn has made them out of touch with their communities in a way that athletes of previous generations were not. But now a leader of the old guard of politically active athletes, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, has taken to Newsweek magazine to sing the praises of LeBron James, today's athlete activist, writing, quote, in the 60s and 70s, there were fewer of us black athletes/activists, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, and a handful of others. Today, a lot more are speaking out. Sadly, aside from the numbers, so little has changed. Athletes are still punished for using their constitutional rights, and the things we protested 50 years ago are still happening. But players like LeBron, Colin Kaepernick, Andrew Hawkins, Serena and Venus Williams, Eric Reed, and many others keep fighting for justice. All right, I'm going to leave some of what Kareem said out of the conversation and just circle back to our conversation yesterday a bit about my contention that the exorbitant amount of money that pro athletes make today has made them different from pro athletes of yesteryear.
I don't think it does. I think it actually lends itself to having a greater perspective. I certainly know that in my case, where I come from, poverty, and now I live a life of affluence, I humbly say. But you know what? It gives me that dual existence. It gives me that perspective. When I was just in one situation, growing up in an adverse neighborhood, I couldn't see the forest for the trees. You don't know the grander picture. You don't know the bigger picture. It takes you to climb that mountain a little higher, to have that vantage point, to realize how you could truly affect and have change. It's interesting to me when you talk about activism, you're talking about protesting, you talk about policy, whatever you want to talk about, being political. It comes down to the 3 T's, as they say: time, talent, and treasure, in terms of individual athlete investment in others. You give them your time, man. Go to the community. Go to those who are less fortunate. You give them your talents. You actually just say, look, let's work on this so you can become something greater than me. Or you give them your treasure. You offer services and resources to others. But I do it with a spirit, and I know a lot of people do it with a spirit, unfortunately. It's not front page news. You do it with a spirit so that you can grab that next kid and he could be you or better. So I think a ton of athletes do the right things. I don't think the money disqualifies you. I think it actually amplifies your message, especially when you go back to those who are less fortunate.
Before you go, Dante, disqualifying, I certainly don't think is part of my argument, but just different. I think the athletes with all of this wealth are different from the previous generation.
So is the question about athletes with this wealth in a generation, or does does wealth not qualify you to be a politician? Because to be politically active, because there are politicians that are worth billions of dollars. There's like 6 of them, and I can give them to you, then I can give you more that are worth more than $1 billion. And that is not the reason why they're politicians. Is because they can aggregate people and move them to do different things. Like, wealth is not a play into political activity. And we act like politicians are the smartest people in the world when they're not. The smartest people in the world work for politicians, and they give them their perspective, and they help them see the world from a different perspective. So perspective is an aggregate of your life circumstances. I think as athletes, we have a full perspective view of life. Most athletes come from nothing, or come from middle class to lower class families, and they have a perspective over their life's journey that can help them see the world and our country in a worldly view, in a full view, because now they have wealth, and at one point they didn't have wealth. So you can understand the bottom, you can understand the top, and you have empathy for the middle. So I think an athlete would be in that field to have perspective and have empathy for the American people.
Before you go, I just want to add this. I think that wealth is most effectively and properly acquired over time. There's a journey to wealth. And that's why, generally speaking, like, you get to be 50 years old and you handle your wealth a lot better than you did when you were 25. And so I think a lot of times athletes going straight from a college campus to great wealth miss out on that journey, and they're not even aware.
To that point, the average American millionaire is 57 years old.
But you have politicians worth, Donald Trump worth $3 billion, and he never acquired the wealth. You have governors who are worth $1 billion, and they never acquired it. It was given to them.
There's a reason our country's in a mess.
Yeah, and the perspective is right, you know, because I think as an athlete growing up, the beauty about being an athlete, especially in the team sport, I talked about this yesterday, is the inclusion part. Because we can connect with so many different people because of being an athlete. I think for me, opening up and seeing the world gave me a different perspective. And it made me zero in on what I didn't have and what's not happening in my community, because being an athlete allowed me to travel and journey, talk to different people, see different societies, see different cultures. That rounded me into a better individual. So I'm able to connect with people in my community a lot differently from what I saw and how I grew up. And now how to apply it. The wealth part allows me to get into doors in situations that I couldn't normally get into. And it's incumbent upon me, if I'm going to walk that path, to know as much as I can. I think that's sometimes with the fight that you have, is regards to athletes getting involved and not really digging into the meat of the situation and not knowing what they're doing. Well, a lot of that too is you learn along the way by putting the right people around you that help you learn and navigate through these circumstances.
And that's all a politician does. That was my point. A politician does that, especially basketball players as athletes, because we have a world game. So we go to different places in the world. We have empathy for different cultures. We get to see things from a different lens than most other sports, and because we have to aggregate these people for our cause of basketball.
As a former mid-major athlete, I get it. The only thing that I think a lot of times we don't take time to consider, and again, it's just because we focus in on all the positives that go along with wealth, and we never like take a step back and go, you know what, there's some ramifications of wealth as well. And I love the television show Game of Thrones. It's about they get lazy, everything. They get lazy, everything. Myself as well, because I'm not removed from wealth. It's just I've spent a lot of time evaluating myself and others where I'm not sure all of us have done that.
Well, I want to push back on that, because I think that using a king as an example in the old ways, in the old sentiments, in the old lineage was based on relationship. So you became a king because you were a prince. You were a prince because who your daddy was.
Generational
your mother.
wealth.
Generational wealth. But now we're becoming new kings, and it's not by relationship. Mama and daddy had nothing. And you know what? No one said you're going to be king, because I was never a prince. I just came from nothing and made something of it. So it's a completely different example when you talk about today's athletes.
The issue I'm saying, though, is that once you become a king, though, trust me, you take on the mentality of a king.
No. You know why? Because our origins are different. We're from a different ground, a different soil.
You might take on the mentality because you live a certain way, but you do understand what it means like to be a peasant or to be in the bottom class. And that empathy is what causes great kings to be able to look at.
You don't take on the mentality. You
don't lose that
perspective. You take on the complexion of a king. You look like, but you're not that mentally.
Isn't that a part of the journey, though? Because by going through the wealth and understand, I can give you a blueprint on what it is wealthy and all the things you need to look out for. But until I actually go through it and experience it, then I know. Listen, when I got money, yeah, I went through some stuff, you know, but I had to learn and navigate my way, then pull it back.
Yep.
But in order for me to learn, I had to go through it.
Right. First generation.
Here's my pushback would be, and
Okay.
again, it is, I think we make the mistake, we came from a different place than them, so therefore we're not capable of acting or thinking like them. And I totally reject that.
I reject that too. You're talking about the athletes of the 60s and 70s?
No. I'm just talking about human beings. Your argument seems to be that because I came into wealth from great poverty, therefore my perspective is different than anybody else who acquired wealth or was handed wealth.
I have greater understandings of both sides, the best of both worlds.
Doesn't mean, again, and so bottom line, what I'm saying is you're just as capable of acting like, and I hate to go here, but you're just as capable of acting like Trump as anybody else on the planet who comes into great wealth. You can take on those characteristics. It doesn't, just because you came from Compton or whatever, doesn't mean that wealth and privilege, and there's a lot of privilege to being an athlete, a lot.
Oh, yeah.
A lot. And that privilege impacts you the same way it does any other human being. Just because he may have been born into wealth and privilege doesn't mean you can't take on the exact same.
Well, it does, because now you're questioning what my foundation was in my formidable years and the pain and the trauma that I went through that will always be a play in everything I do. Like, it's just like when you instill...
all weak?
No. We're all strong, too. We just fight the weaknesses. Here's the thing. If you want to look at how we're all principle-based, what are those principles? The years that you're formidable, the years where you're trying to figure out who you are, that is always imprinted. You're a guy who's religious. You're a guy who knows that those principles will always be, and no matter how far you stray, there's something that is of gravity pulling you back. And that's the same thing with me and my upbringing.
I'm saying that for me, what I believe is that the only thing that keeps me in check is my faith in God and belief in a higher power. Everything, I'm weak in every way possible. And if not for the grace of God, I would give in to my weaknesses a lot more. A lot of people, and look, a lot of people try to slay their demons with religion and things, and they fail. I do too. Last weekend, I failed. And I fail tomorrow. But I'm just saying, most people don't have that mentality. I'm telling you, they take on this thing of, I'm different. I can handle this. Because I had this or that experience, that wouldn't be me. Oh, look at that person. I would never be like that.
Respect your testimony, but you know what? I ain't climbed this mountain because I was weak. This mountain, there's atmospheric pressure. There were variables pushing me down. There were situations and circumstances that I would never be able to fully unveil. But weakness will not be
You're understanding my use of word weak.
What comes with wealth? What people want is power. Okay, and that's as addictive as anything, okay? And how you handle that power, I think, is very important. And a lot of times, Jason, when you acquire so much wealth, you acquire the ability to influence people and things. And that's hard to let go, because if you don't have the foundation, if you're able to move and shake the way you want and move mountains, that power is actually more powerful than the wealth. Because there's a lot of people that got a lot of money that don't have the power. And so kings were looking for power along to go with that wealth. And I know what you're saying in that aspect, coming from if your base is not strong and you got money, but then now our athletes today have more power. They have more power to influence. LeBron James changed totally everything, training camp, the way things are traded in NBA, that's power. I don't care. There's a lot of dudes in the league that got money. They don't have this power. That's the big
difference. And where
difference.
did that come from, those principles?
That's what I'm saying.
That came from?
Yeah.
Here's my last point on that in terms of foundation, principles, blah, blah, blah. What my argument is, if you're not constantly working on your foundation, you are going to fall.
Oh, yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
All right, coming up, Big Ben may have won his battle with Antonio Brown,